Hello everyone, and welcome to Filtered, the podcast, wherever you're listening from. My name is Phil Dye, and Filtered looks at the issues of a society on the brink, and especially Australian society on the brink. Very soon in Australia, we're looking at a general election. And in the 70 years that I've had on this planet, I cannot remember an electorate so disenchanted and so at odds with one another than I have seen now. I've also never seen a political leadership so reluctant to listen to the people. The people are making their voices heard, or they're trying to, but the politicians simply don't listen to them. And many, many policies are being made by our leadership elite against the wishes of the public. Issues like self-identification, self-ID, issues like migration, issues on education, the social issues that concern parents and concern families. It's as if they actually mention some of these issues, then they'll have to have policies on it and announce those policies, and gee, they're too scared to do that. Now, I'm not talking about just one party here. Both of the large parties in Australia, the Labor Party and the Liberal National Party, seem gutless in making any announcement on any social issue. It's as if they're puppets and they're being pulled by strings from some global force. So we're left with minor parties that are willing to stand up and put their heads above the barricade. There's plenty of those, the Trumpet of Patriots, the Libertarians, One Nation, freedom parties, Family First, lots of them. But the feeling in the electorate is that, oh, gee, that's just a waste if I vote for them. And can we trust them anyway? I was reading through some posts on X, and I found one that really said it extremely well from Helen Steniland. Here it is.
The macro issue is that the left have participated in a gaslighting campaign against the electorate that is so profound, so fundamental, so brazen, that even now it takes my breath away. They propagated the obviously untrue and insane idea that any man can be a woman on his say-so, and that this declaration removes all physical, sexual, and socialized differences between them. Any politician who is prepared to back this utterly dishonest stance completely disqualifies themselves from the role of representation. We are at a point in time where the very notion of democracy is under threat, and the left chose to show themselves as being completely and utterly unfit for the job of fighting for it. That's the material problem. That's the actual harm.
And this reply from Avam Non-Man.
Anyone on the left who thinks this utterly dishonest mindset only applies to gender ideology is deluded. If you can lie about something so obviously untrue, then you can't be trusted on anything.
And that applies to both left and right parties, because there are those on the right who support the great lie of gender ideology, and there are those on the left. It seems to be some other force is definitely pulling the strings, it would seem. Now, the minor parties don't seem to have anyone pulling the strings. And in this episode, this is part one of a conversation with Mark Hornshaw from the Libertarian Party. And we're going to be dealing with deregulation, with education, and with families. In part two, the next episode, we'll be dealing with migration, and we'll be looking at the voting process and how you go about making the most of your vote. Migration, of course, is a very big issue. Both episodes go for about 35 minutes, and there's some brain breaks during that, so they're not going for too long. So, let's start. Mark Hornshaw from the Libertarians.
Good morning, Phil. Thanks for having me on.
Look, you're the director of policy for the Libertarians, which in Australia are regarded as a minor party. I wanted to look at the policies one by one to see how they differ to other mainstream parties and some of the detail behind those policies.
Sure.
We might start with deregulation and privatisation.
Yeah, this is about things where the government is actually running a business like the ABC, competing with other media providers, but, they're giving them a $1.1 billion bailout every year, when they could stand on their own 2 feet like other media organisations, or the NBN, which is a bit of a white elephant. They developed that, right on the cusp of better wireless technology coming out. But those sort of businesses can be run better by private enterprise. They're not a form of welfare, so to speak. So this is different to saying privatise Medicare. I mean, you couldn't do that because who would run Medicare? It's a welfare service. But when it's something that is a business, it could easily be run much better by entrepreneurs.
Some listeners would be saying, oh, the ABC is not a business. We can't regard it as a business.
I'd say we could regard it as a propaganda arm of the government because their editorial bias is always strongly in favour of more government.
Yeah.
They'll say that they're not biased between the parties, but that just means they'll equally push for bigger government through Liberal or bigger government through Labor. But never smaller government, right? Never more freedom, always more top-down control. And of course, because that's, how their bread is buttered.
I think most listeners would be agreeing with you, and certainly they have an agenda on a whole heap of issues, which we'll discuss later. But what about the idea of the ABC partly privatised so that could take advertising, limited advertising, a little bit like SBS did, 20 years ago? Would that work?
No, because whoever your major donor or sponsor is the person who's going to control the editorial space.
Yeah.
So if they're getting a little bit of money from somebody else, but the majority of their money from the state, well, that's who they're going to be pandering to.
So another organisation you talk about is Australia Post, completely privatising that.
Yes.
I know they've tried pretty hard, Australia Post, to sort of get their act together. What do you think a privatised service would look like? Would it still have outlets like that people can go to and buy stamps and all that sort of stuff?
I mean, Australia Post really is a relic of a bygone era, isn't it? It was set up as a government monopoly when Post was the only way for someone in the country to communicate with the outside world. They took on the telegram service and that sort of thing, which eventually became telecom. But this is the whole idea of having it as a government monopoly is so that you can charge the same price to someone in the outback for sending a letter, which might cost actually hundreds of dollars to get that letter to its destination, and you charge exactly the same price to someone in the city who's posting to someone in their same postcode, which might only cost a few cents. But instead of charging people for based on what it costs, you charge them all the same. And so you're cross-subsidising, country customers via city customers. But this is from a bygone era. And
it would look completely different. It might have internet where people can go and use the internet instead of the local library, for example.
They could do whatever they want, whatever they think is going to be profitable. But things do just cost different amounts. Car parking is a lot more expensive in the inner city than it is in the country, right? But what if country customers had to cross-subsidise the cost of parking? What if we said car parking has to cost the same everywhere in the country? Everywhere in Australia, car parking is going to cost you $2 a day, which would be ridiculously too expensive in the outback where there's plenty of space to park for nothing, but would be ridiculously cheap in inner city Sydney, and we'd turn half of Sydney into car parking spaces to accommodate it, subsidised by people in the country. I mean, wouldn't that be ridiculous?
Yep.
That's essentially what we do with mail.
I'm talking with Mark Hornshaw, the Director of Policy for the Libertarian Party. Another area as far as deregulation goes is the taxi industry or retail trading hours and liquor licensing. Now, liquor licensing in Australia is very different to overseas, where you can go into your local 7-Eleven and buy some beers or a bottle of wine. But surely liquor licensing needs some degree of regulation. Otherwise, the liquor retailers in the alcohol industry will simply go mad. Trying to sell to kids, trying to sell into the Indigenous communities, which I know is debatable these days. How do you control that?
These are really state issues. Now, I'm the federal policy chair, and so policies on these sort of things might vary from state to state, but I'll just give you my opinion anyway, since we're talking. Things like whether you sell to kids is just there's a law against that. So that would be unaffected by a loosening of licensing, so to speak. Licensing is just basically a way of saying that Tom and Dick already sell liquor here, and so Harry has to miss out. sorry, you're not allowed to open an outlet because there's whatever the quota set by the state government has already been met. And so it's not quite a monopoly, but it's an artificial restriction on who can do business. Now, it might happen that Harry is a better entrepreneur, has a better business model. Harry might open up and Tom might go out of business. But we'd never know that because Harry's just prevented by law from opening up. And so, like relaxing some of the licensing requirements. It's the same with pharmacies. There's a pharmacy guild that says, no, we've got enough pharmacies in this area. You're not allowed to open up. But who says what is enough? And who says that the incumbent businesses are better operators than any new entrepreneur trying to open up? So we just want to say, let the market decide. Let the market decide who is doing the best job or stands to potentially do the best job of selling beer or selling pharmaceutical products or whatever it is. And same with taxis. To say that, no, there's only allowed to be 1,000 taxis in this town, 1,001 would just be unfair. Well, unfair to whom? If the customers want it and someone wants to operate that taxi and pick up passengers, why should someone who already drives a taxi be able to say, no, that's unfair to me? Well, okay, you don't own that business. You conduct business. You hope that someone will take your services, but that's just life for an entrepreneur. The customer might just walk past and go to somebody else.
Yeah, I can see how taxis work. I'm going to push back though with liquor licensing.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the example of Dan Murphy's trying to open an outlet near Darwin. Dan Murphy's have had one staff member stabbed up there. It is not a safe environment in order to open a bottle shop. And the Indigenous people up there is a lot of pushback. They don't want it up there. How can we trust these organisations to do the right thing? Some members of the public do want it up there, but there's others who don't. How do we trust them to act ethically?
I think this is a different issue to liquor licensing. Liquor licensing is just to say, no, liquor land is already there, so Dan Murphy's can't be. It's a restriction on trade. If you want to say, no, all liquor outlets are banned in such and such a place, that's up to the local council or the state level. It's a hard one to make a blanket policy on.
Yeah, so it would come down to state governments saying, okay, well, look, we favour deregulation, but we are going to put a regulation on this particular area where there's going to be no liquor shops at all. They're able to do that.
They can do that. They can do whatever they want.
We're going to move on to another area of deregulation, which is education. That is the TAFE sector, universities and private colleges. Now, how on earth can we deregulate private colleges? I used to work for them, and some of them are the most shonky places ever. How on earth can we trust them if we take away regulation?
I did too, and universities. So what do you mean, how can we trust them? Trust them to do what?
Well, we have to actually have some degree of measurement and evaluation and oversight of them to make sure they're doing the right thing and not just passing people who have no idea of what they're doing, which is, in my experience, that's what many of them do. And if you deregulate them, you give them carte blanche to do whatever they want to do.
Mostly the phenomenon of what you're talking about, where they just pass people who shouldn't be passed, is to do with international students, right?
Yeah.
And those international students face heavy pressure that if they fail, they'll lose their visa, they'll lose their student visa and have to be sent home. But they've brought in people that really aren't suitable, don't have the English skills, shouldn't actually be studying the thing they're studying. They're studying that thing just to get the visa. So really this is an immigration issue. The other thing is, government gives, accreditation to say that anybody who gets any Cert 4 is equivalent to any other Cert 4. Any diploma is equivalent to any other diploma. Any bachelor degree is equivalent to any other bachelor degree. All you have to do as an institution is sign off to say this person is qualified at such and such a level, AQ of 5 or 6 or 7, whatever it is, and they are now qualified equally as if they went to some better institution. So this is another example of too much government. You know, if you said, I've got a diploma from, the College of Kickatinalong, and someone said, well, I've never heard of the College of Kickatinalong, and you say, but I got a diploma. Well, so what? I can print the diploma right here off my computer. I'll just make one up right now. And you say, no, but the government has signed this off. Can you see how it's the government that gives artificial credibility to a bad acting college?
I can. It boils down to in the concept of merit, that we no longer have distinctions, high credits, and fails. No one ever fails a course anymore. This is what we need to bring back as well, this concept of merit and meritorious achievement.
Yes, exactly.
We're going to have a short break, and after, we're going to come back and we're going to talk more closely about public schools. We'll be back in a moment.
Sun is rising with all the sweetness it can bring. A new day is beginning, and on my fear vanished. No memories are bittersweet, but I got to keep my feet on the ground, 'cause the sound of change reminds me again that what's gone just won't come back. Change is coming. Change is coming.
Yes, well, that was Winterwoods with Changes Coming. Fantastic song. Just look them up, Winterwoods from Belgium. Yes, and change could be coming in Australia in 2025. I know that many people hope so. Let's continue the interview I had with Mark Hornshaw, who is the Director of Policy for the Libertarian Party. Mark, we've talked a little bit about education. We've both worked in education. We know that some of the universities and colleges can't be trusted. The Libertarians want to do something very, very different with public education and particularly public schools. Can you explain that?
We want a voucher system so that any funding that there is, any government funding, should follow the student rather than the institution. And so if people like their public school, they can still use the government voucher there. Schools that are doing a good job, that families actually say, no, this is the one for us, they'll voluntarily use their voucher at that school. But if they want to use that somewhere else, they can do that. Or if people want to home educate, they should be able to do that too.
So this voucher system you talk about would be given to the families, to the parents, and they can spend that voucher wherever they want at whatever school they want their children to go to. Is that right?
So we want people to be able to innovate and see what works, and for parents to be able to reward those institutions that are doing a good job with their business.
This voucher system, Mark, I've seen how that works in the UK with the Michaela School, where if we get down to dollars and cents, every student from kindergarten to, say, year 4 gets maybe $8,000 every year. So the family, if they've got 2 kids between those ages, they'll get $16,000 per annum to spend at the school that they want.
Yeah.
And it means that the schools, as you mentioned, can differentiate. Some can focus on art, some can focus on discipline, some can focus on politics, whatever it might be. But it gives them that ability, and it works a treat. It takes away the government influence, and this is what schools have suffered with, I believe, in the last 20 years, this government influence on what kids learn. So would you'd change the value of the voucher for those in high school?
Yes, it could basically follow what the government's currently spending. They're doing this in many American states, especially red states, bringing in school choice. It's happening in other places. It can happen here. When you say that there's too much government control, if you can get on a curriculum setting board for a national curriculum, that's a more powerful position than a Reserve Bank governor or even a prime minister. You're there influencing, putting your ideas into the whole country's children. And basically leftists crave those sort of positions.
Well, the meddling, interfering bureaucrat has become the norm. And you're quite right. Whoever controls the curriculum controls the hearts and minds of our young people.
And so we've got this battle for who controls the national curriculum. Well, we want to abolish the national curriculum. We don't think there even needs to be a federal Department of Education at all.
Yep.
It should be as close as possible to the individual learner where curriculum decisions are made, but at least abolishing the federal department, devolving it down to states, is at least one step closer to the individual learner. It takes away that honeypot for that meddling, interfering bureaucrat who thinks they want to control everything.
So what your voucher system would do would put parents back in control of what their children learn and where they learn. But what about if a parent wanted to send their child or their children to one of the elite private schools? Could they use the voucher for that and then add some cash?
Yeah, there's people have a mindset that private schools are more expensive than public schools. They're not necessarily. Some of those very expensive elite schools are very expensive, but all of that goes to their rowing and their
Yep.
Their sporting fields and their swimming pools and all of that sort of thing. Public schools are super expensive. I don't have figures in front of me, but many private schools are cheaper in terms of their actual cost. The fees that the parents at school is dearer. But if you consider all of the funding that's put in by parents or the government, public schools are inefficient. They're costly. Private schools actually often run much more efficiently.
It's interesting you say that. I've taught in both sectors. And yeah, look, the teachers everywhere are fantastic. Most of them are absolutely wonderful. But the private sector can get rid of their dead wood. And look, there's dead wood in every profession. And the private schools can get rid of that and employ exactly who they want, whereas the public schools really struggle to do that, and often they can't due to regulation.
Yes.
Mark, we're going to have a short break and we'll come back and talk about some family issues.
This podcast strongly supports the declaration of Biological Truth Australia. This is a site where you can express your belief in biological reality and show your concern at the rise of transgender ideology in schools, sports, and society. It's not transphobic or disrespectful, but states that while inclusion is fine, even inclusion must have limits. It's free, easy, and you can sign privately so your name isn't public. Join over 5,000 Australians who've added their name for something they believe in. Just search for Declaration of Biological Truth Australia.
I'm talking to Mark Hornshaw, who's the Director of Policy for the Libertarian Party in Australia. And we've talked about deregulation, we've talked about education a little, and I wanted to talk about family, Mark. Why have you decided to really have that focus on family? Because as far as I know, no other political party has a topic, family.
Yeah, our policy platform for this coming election, a libertarian vision, policies for prosperity, family and freedom. And I think that's important because the libertarian world is a world where there's less top-down control, but without top-down control by the government, what is there? It doesn't mean there's no government. It means that we self-govern. And how do we self-govern? Generally, over the centuries and millennia, through families. God puts the lonely in families, it says somewhere in the Psalms. And families are the way that we create, a healthy society. And so we don't want to just replace the state with nothing. We want to replace the state with individual sovereignty and strong communities built through strong families.
But that means empowering parents to make their own decisions about their children. Do you think parents want that?
That's a hard question to answer.
Yes, Mark, I'm sorry to ask it, but over the last 5 years, I've seen parents who really don't seem to care what their kids are learning at school. I ask them, what do you think of the gender stuff? And they don't seem to know much about it. What do you think of the history curriculum? They don't know much about that. What do you think about discipline? What about the kids in the class? And it seems like they've just handed it over.
Many people are so taken in by the woke narrative. And they think that if they, that it's almost a religious devotion, that you have to get more and more woke and you have to double down on wokeness and you can never question the woke narrative. But once there's a prick in that bubble, and I think the Trump administration has been more than a prick in the bubble, it's been an explosion, that some people are willing to say, yeah, it was actually stupid all along. I never really thought that we should have kids transitioning and on puberty blockers all along. And it's like, okay, I wish you'd been brave enough to say that, but at least you've come to that realisation now.
I think what's happened is that many parents have just handed over this decision-making process to the schools and the government because they're so damn busy with the mortgage and they're trying to do this and that and renovation and blah, blah. And they've forgotten that they're the parents and they've got to make the decisions and discipline their child and give them the rules and the values that they want the child to live with rather than the government give them.
There are also very pernicious laws that have been passed at the state level mostly. That like if you're counselling someone and then they say, I'm thinking about gender and I'm thinking maybe I was born in the wrong body, the only legal answer is to say, oh, yes, you were born in the wrong body. You are the opposite gender to what you look like. Let's start the process. Let's put you on puberty blockers. Let's start transitioning you and so on.
Yes.
And if you counsel someone to say, actually, you're wonderful the way you are and no one's born in the wrong body, and you want to, help someone to be at peace with their biological reality, that's considered hateful. And that's, you know what I mean? This is just ridiculous perversion of the truth.
And no one voted for this, Mark. This was not in policy when the Labor Party or any party has been elected.
We want to remove all of those awful laws and say, let counsellors counsel. And so a lot of this is, a lot of parents operate in fear. And they're told things like, well, would you want a live daughter or a dead son, and things like this. And the fear is put into parents that if you don't go along with all of this, you're going to lose your child. They're going to commit suicide.
And most parents would go, oh, a professional's telling me this, and they trust that professional, and they just go along with it. Where research has proved that there's more chance of the child thinking about suicide after they've transitioned and gone through all that process than before. So it's an absolute lie.
Yes. And so they're deliberately putting fear into parents in order to push this agenda to the detriment of the child. We're against all of that. We have a policy on protecting women's spaces and children's development.
So the Libertarians will stop this ridiculous gender ideology stuff that's being pushed down the throat of Australians and pushed onto school children. Will it cover things like biological men playing in women's sport, on the right of women or men to gather on a same-sex basis, on a single-sex basis, and the stuff that's being taught in schools?
And they're doing it right from preschool. And we've got all the rainbow stuff and all of the Indigenous stuff and all the woke stuff is being drummed into kids from nappy stage. We want to restore the legal definition of a woman as a biological female. We don't want people to be able to just arbitrarily change their birth certificate or passport. We don't want, we want to allow women's clubs, associations to have women only, meaning biological females only, if that's what they want to do.
And men playing in women's sports?
Including sport. There can still be accommodations for trans people. There can still be, other categories in sport. That there can be inclusive, there can be open categories and so on. There's nothing to stop any of that. People like Leah Thomas in America shouldn't be able to just go in the women's race because they want to.
Yes, for those listeners who are unaware of Leah Thomas is a biological man, very tall, ID'd as a woman, and has won all of these women's races so that the women and girls don't get a chance. But that's recently been reversed, and his medals have been stripped from him. Now, one of the other hats I wear is I'm the chair of the Declaration of Biological Truth Australia, and out of the over 5,000 signatories that we have, half of them are private signatories who sign because they don't want their name to be public. And 3/4 of those are parents. So parents are actually quite scared of making their opinion known on this issue.
Well, yeah, there is, as you say, a lot of fear. Which is just silly, right? Why should you be fearful of saying something that's true?
Yeah, that's right. That's biologically true. And that every university in the country teaches. So if they're going to take offence at us, they've got to take offence to every university that teaches biology in Australia.
Well, I mean, speaking of universities, like all of the woke sort of stuff and all of the gender stuff has been in universities for about the last 50 years. And has been sort of cloistered away there until maybe the last 5 years. Would you agree with that? That it's kind of leaked out of the universities and then exploded everywhere. All of the transgender sort of stuff.
Yes, it has been it was in the universities when I was there, and that's sort of 6 years ago. But it has exploded, and I think it's exploded since the start of COVID.
Interesting.
And I think we took our eyes off the ball. We simply were distracted, and as any war general knows, that if the enemy is distracted like we were with COVID, that's the time to hit.
Yeah.
And they hit the schools and universities extra hard during that period. Anything else on families, Mark?
Well, just, it's in our economic policies, is low flat taxes, but it impacts on family as well. We want to allow couples to income split. The tax-free threshold at the moment is somewhere around 19-something thousand. And after that, you start paying tax. The minimum wage in Australia for a full-time worker is about 48,000. We don't think there should be any tax on a minimum wage earner. We want to increase the tax-free threshold to 50,000. But for couples, we want to be able to combine the tax-free threshold for couples. So effectively, it would be 100,000 of your combined income would be tax-free. So it doesn't matter if one partner is earning all of that and the other is a stay-at-home parent, they still get a $100,000 tax-free threshold. They could still combine that and only pay tax after that. So that encourages families. But it is hard for people to start families when they're flat out just trying to survive.
That's right. It really, and it's biological that if we see that it's a difficult environment to raise kids in, then we won't have kids. It's, all animals do it, from beetles to kangaroos. And if it's a drought, well, you're not going to reproduce.
Yes. All of our sort of government messaging and our tax system is to encourage both partners to work. It's to say, no, we need everybody working. So even those that do have kids aren't able to, to be with their kids. They have to go to work and they have to send their kids off to childcare from basically baby stage right through, and they never see their kids. Daycare and then preschool and then school and then university and then they're gone. And so we want people to not only be able to have kids, but to enjoy being a family and to have less pressure for both parties to work.
Well, that winds up part one of just who and what are the Libertarians. I agree with most of it. I'm not quite sure about the regulation stuff. I think we need to regulate because humans can't be trusted. But yes, Mark's probably right. We have too much of it. I certainly agree with his education stance, with the education stance of the Libertarians. And in the next episode, which is part 2, we're going to look at migration, we'll look at free speech, and we'll look at just how to vote so that a vote is not wasted, because that is a real concern with most voters out there. Now, if you have any questions you'd like me to ask Mark for the next episode, please email them. phil@filtered.com.au. phil@filtered.com.au. And don't forget that filters is PHILTERED. Just send in the questions. Tell us who you are, and I'll ask Mark in the next episode. I hope you've enjoyed this episode on the Libertarians. As I said, there's another one. The next one's coming up pretty soon. And hopefully I'll be interviewing some other parties as well in the lead up to election 2025. My name's Phil Dye. You've been listening to Filtered, the podcast. I'll see you later.